This is great.
Oh, once we get into it, it'll be good. Thank you so much, Doc. I really appreciate it. Welcome to Bits and Boards, a conversation where myself, lTruran, along with our audience, get to learn from those on their game design journey. Today, we are joined by Mattox of Keymaster Games, a publisher focusing on easy-to-get-into titles that are to be enjoyed by your friends and family. You may know them from their latest Park series or from the aisles of Walmart, Target, or Barnes & Nobles, not to mention the hundreds, if not thousands, of friendly local game stores. For YouTube, who will not have heard the first botched version of that, how does it hearing it the second time? Like, how do you feel being in like Target and Walmart? I went to Target today and I saw it right there next to all the other big titles, like right on their shelf.
Yeah, that was a crazy moment. We got into games just loving art and that side of it, and I would go through Target, and their game like area has totally expanded in the past even few months or so. They've really like built out and rearranged Targets and whatnot. But going in there, like back in 2015 or whatnot, it was always like that dream of like, what if our game was one day here and whatnot. And so it's been crazy to be able to go in there, and I always look, hey, what are like the stock levels of the games? How are things doing? And like listening to the conversations that people have around the game aisle. I know that might be a little creepy. I don't know, but it's also funny and fun,
No, for
and
sure.
very enlightening of what people are into and why they might be purchasing something. And then if my wife or friend is there, if someone like is near the parks, they're always like, hey, you know, this guy helped make this game. I'm like, don't tell them that. You know, like, I mean, I'm happy to talk about it, but it's that weird thing of like promoting the thing that you made. You know, it's always feels weird for me,
Of
but
course.
someone else who loves it will sell it for you. It's like, oh great, awesome, this is
But luckily for you guys, you don't have to say nice things about your own products because you have like hundreds of people on Board Game Geeks and other forums like talking about it. And I know people personally who have always like, oh, did you play these games and stuff? And I've been thinking about like, how do we start this conversation? And I decided the most awkwardly way possible.
yes,
So
let's go.
I'm just gonna admit I've never played a Keymaster game. When
Yeah.
I graduated college, all we were playing were like those super heavy 4 to 6 hour games, D&D or Magic
yeah.
the Gathering. But I got introduced to you guys. It had to be Creative South 2016, 17, or maybe 18. Do you know what years you guys were there?
I feel like it was probably around 2017 or 18 or so.
So I was trying to
But
figure it out
I
by.
was doing a workshop there at one point, which was I do type design or like font design.
Okay.
So part of that was that there, and then Keymaster also exhibited there. So those years all blend for me too. But
Yeah. I was
Creative
trying to
South is
figure it
awesome.
out. I remember your booth, and I think the space game. Which one was that called?
Space Park
Space Park. I think that
or
was
Control.
there. So I saw
Control, I
Control.
think, is there.
I saw
Yeah.
Control
Okay.
for
Yeah.
sure. And is it Campy Creatures?
Campy Creatures.
I
They're
saw,
all right behind
right.
me. All
I saw those
Josh's
two for
crazy
sure,
art.
and I'm trying to think of it because Space Park was there or not, and try to figure out the years that way. But because I started getting into games, people are always asking me like, "What are your favorite games or favorite game studios?" And Keymasters, even though I've never played your games, like it's always the first one I mention because
Nice.
everything you guys do just seems at a quality higher than most of the people like I look around. Like if I go into Target, like we just talked about, there's like rows and rows of just knockoff titles ripping off Cards Against Humanity, right? It's just like box under box of like ripping off that model. And then there's a game about going to national parks that feels unlike everything else around it.
Yeah, I'm glad that that's sticking out. That's our core kind of hope or focus for our company is like, what if we were able to like get people to question what is possible in modern board gaming? For some people, they played Life or Monopoly growing up, and we get to be hopefully a gateway game that goes into those places where it's like, yeah, maybe this game is a step into those 4 to 5 hour game nights or whatnot, and maybe it is the end destination too, where people are like, no, this is just a great game that I love to spend an hour or two with. But just being that moment where it's like, oh, I grew up playing these games that are more like strategy or luck based. Like I play Candyland with my kid this morning. Like that's pure luck, but that is a good way to introduce colors or whatnot for them,
Sure.
for Sarah, who's 3 years old, and they're having a good time, but just what games can do makes me excited to go like, how can we do this from an art and a component perspective, along with just the mechanics themselves and like inviting people deeper into this world of games.
Yes, all of that resonates like through just your packaging, through your website. Like, again, like having never played it, I still pick up on all of that. And then the final like nail in the coffin of my love for you guys was I've been following JP Boneyard since National Poster Retrospecticus. And then
Yeah.
to see his 59 state parks show up in your game, it was just like what are they trying to do to me? Just like take all my money?
That's right. That's the goal here. That's the main secret mission of no, I'm just kidding. JP is a wonderful person. He that was a really cool project parks wise. We can dive into that whenever it would make sense conversation wise, but he was also same as you. Like I loved just seeing the 59 Park series, and then Riley Cran did the typeface for that series. And so being a type designer, I was like, man, no, that was so cool. Riley had done a lot of the Lost type stuff before that. So I was following along the series and just in love with it. And we had put some of their stuff too in just like fun mood boards for other things we were working on, like Campy. And then Josh came along and Josh Emmerich did this crazy art for Campy, which you're a mad scientist trying to capture mortals. And it's all this like old B movie type stuff. They're super silly and fun. But JP saw that game at a Creative Works conference. I think that one was. Okay. And he was like, wow, the art in this game is really cool. And then as they played it, they had a great time. And so that is what led him to reach out to us and be like, hey, we have all this art. Do y'all want to make a game? And we were like, yes. Like it was like that middle school crush moment where you're like, they like us, we like them. Oh my gosh, like let's have a great time. And so yeah, that was a fun conundrum to solve too, to be like the art's kind of all done, or that it adheres to the style, but we need to design a game around it.
Yeah, and now you have like multiple games, like trails and stuff coming off of that. I'm sure that's a whole bunch of extra problems. But let's try to get us a little back on track. Not your fault. I'm just all over the place always.
No, you're going to have to rein me in. I'm going to tell you that right now.
But let's go back and just give people a little bit of an introduction. So can you tell us what your role at Keymaster Games is? Tell us a little bit about like what the team makeup looks like. Do you guys work in an office together? Is it all remote? And just kind of what does the world of Keymaster Games look behind the scenes?
Pull back the curtain. I feel like Keymaster feels like this mysterious entity at times, of like the Wizard of Oz level thing of like, what are they doing? Who are these people? And we want to get a lot better about that. And things like this, we want to be way more a part of, where it's supporting creators and some of their first endeavors, or just talking about things in the industry and what we've learned along the way and sharing more of that knowledge. But for us, Keymaster is currently 5 people. I'm the creative director there. So I oversee the mechanics side of our games and the art side of our games, and making sure all of that is lining up in the way that would make a Keymaster game a Keymaster game. And so I have been reading a lot of Creativity Inc. from Ed Catmull of Pixar. And that's been a huge thing of just focusing on like leading a creative team to create an inspiring place that is able to yield really amazing for them movies, or for us games year after year. That's my striving goal for the company, is leading a team well, a creative team. So sometimes that looks like me working with Henry, like who designed Parks. He's an outside designer and kind of like a contractor / we would work with him in a way that's like, hey, let's make this project together. And you would get an advance on royalties, and then we'd pay out royalties for every game sold, as game designers typically get paid that way. And so some people there are outside Keymaster. I'm like going all over the place here, but basically there's 5 of us internally. Let me go through that first. Me, Kyle Key, who he and I kind of started the company off. Kyle had the vision for the company, and we worked together on Control, that first game. And then Kyle is an illustrator. He loves 3D stuff and whatnot, and along with just being a guy who can jump into any place and take care of things, from Kickstarters to conventions to all these other areas. He had a convention background of designing a lot of graphics for conventions and whatnot. There's Matt, who is the like operations, basically over everything. Matt Aiken, sorry, I should use full names here. So people, we always just talk to each other in the office. So I was like that way. But Matt Aiken is over, basically came in as finance and operations and overseeing making sure this business is running well from a team standpoint and from the product standpoint. And then Josh Willingbrink recently came on in June, sorry, and that is a new exciting hire for us. And he is taking some of those operation things off of Matt, which has been great. And Matt is going to be doing more like executive type stuff over the company vision and whatnot. And then Jen Graham-Macht is the community manager and oversees all those places, of Reddit to Board Game Geek to Twitter to Facebook, and any questions that people are having, or trying to pull those communities together to celebrate fun moments together and whatnot, and oversees all of that. So that's the 5 of us on the team, but we have a lot of contractors too. Some are sometimes we're with graphic designers or illustrators or game designers and all that good stuff. But that's currently where the team is at.
Yeah, and I think what's super interesting about that is when you think game company, especially if you're coming at it from a hobbyist level, you're going to be like, everyone's just like making prototypes and everyone's just designing games. But if we like look at your structure, Kyle and yourself are probably the only ones actually playing with art, playing with game design, and then the other three are purely just keeping the boat afloat and like making sure you're hitting your targets and making sure, like, I'm assuming one of those three is who's getting you into stores like Target, right? Like if you guys are so obsessed with like the fun aspects, more than half your team has to be focused on the business side.
Yeah, so that's a great call out. I think right now we're moving from a moment like all the people on the team have designed a game, which is crazy, right? It's like all of them are able or have that skill set and also provide lots of play testing together as a team. We'll do a lot of internal dev, and then we'll like release it out to more of like, hey, let's get more and more people involved in the play test and whatnot. But we will dev a lot internally and get feedback there. And that's just a part of like knowing, being able to put on that hat and offer clear feedback in those moments. Because making a game, man, I'm sure you feel it, of just the like, there are sometimes clear problems that are happening, but there's not always clear solutions to those problems. And you have to try a lot of things to figure out, man, this problem actually goes back 3 strategies up that is like leading to this moment or whatnot. And so having everyone be able to wear that hat has been super helpful in the team. But, and all that to say, they still are able to apply a lot of the product side, that fun that you're talking about, or being like catching the vision and going like, hey, what is this game about? What's the hook of it? We then want to apply that to all those other areas too, of like for the sales. And like when we're having a pitch with Target being like, this is why we think this game is going to slap, or for Jen and the way she's talking about with the community, hey, this is where, this is how we want to talk about this game with the community. Being in on all those things is super helpful. But yes, like Kyle and I, have been more on that side, but even we've hired some recent developers and designers too, who are kind of on that, or contractors in that sense, on that side of things too.
Yeah, I think a lot of hobbyists hope to be almost that contract position or to be pitching their designs to publishers. So I think that makes total sense that you would be working. I mean, even in the art world, right? Freelance. I've been a freelance designer for the last 6-7 years. Like, it's a very normal position to be in.
Yeah.
So we're stoked that people like you hire us, right? That's great.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. We love working with contractors too, because I think that's the other part too of figuring out, hey, who's the right person for the project, right? And like being able to be a team. There are certain things that I want to see, like, hey, if we could get this person, this would be so amazing. And for like Campy, I'd seen some of Josh's stuff. He worked with Bottle Logic, which is a brewing company in California. And that was where I was like, man, the bottles he's doing are so cool and have this vibe. He would be the perfect person for this game or whatnot. And I think it just creates these fun moments to go like, cool, there's this project, let's do it together. And then that person is able to impart a part of themselves into that and have a great time.
The project I'm working on with my brother, we hired an illustrator, because my illustration style just didn't make sense. It was the first time as an artist designer I was able to like hire someone I've admired from afar for a long time. And like, I mean, I thought it was going to feel bad being like, oh, it's not my art in the game, but like somehow it feels like way better for me. I don't know if you experienced that as like the creative director, but like there's something empowering about being able to enjoy someone else's art on your project almost more than you might be able to enjoy it yourself if you did it.
Oh, for sure. That is like the best feeling. And when that person like does something and you're just like, oh my gosh, I would have never thought about it this way, or just receiving something that is so right for the project just feels amazing. I think to your point too, there's been Keymaster. We sometimes feel pretty slow on what we're putting out, right? Like Parks was
BBG is like every year you have release, so I don't know what you're talking
about. But I think that like we are trying to, like, I feel like I've been a bottleneck at times, right? Where I can do the graphic design or I can do the mechanics design. And sometimes I get in there and I'm tweaking and I'm like, why am I doing this? Let's offer the feedback to the person and then let them impart more of themselves into that than us trying to, figure it out on the end. And I think there's a nice balance between the two, because I think that's what our hope would be. Like a Keymaster game feels a certain way that's different than any other game that's out there, and because of the team that's involved. And even when we're working with illustrators that are outside our company that we love and we want to feature and whatnot, it's still, there's something about it that people are like, that feels Keymaster,
Yeah. So again, let's try to figure out where we're going to bring this conversation. We were talking to you, like we started talking to you right around Gencon, and it got me thinking, like, again, me and my brother are just working on our games. We live very far from each other, so it's like over Discord, and this idea of like ever bringing our game to an in-person event just doesn't seem feasible. And I'm sure at certain points with even Control, it was just like, when do you make that jump to start investing in booth space and starting to put yourself out there, not just like, hey, can you play test my game, but like, come talk to our booth, possibly buy our game, like come look at us. So what was like the first event that you remember or that you were attending for Keymaster?
Great questions. I think for the conference side of things, there's like, it's funny going to Creative South, like you were talking about earlier. That was one of the earlier conferences that we went to. That was like, people will the value proposition of games, like Control at that time was like 15 or 19 bucks. I can't remember, but it's, had metal coins in it and had a deck of cards and a nice gold foil on the packaging. And next to the other vendors are like, cool, they're really cool pins or other nice coins or things like that. But people just could not believe that the game was like 15 bucks, at a creative convention. Sure. That audience was like, this is beautiful. I want to buy this just because it's beautiful and maybe I'll end up playing it or whatever, and the sales that would happen there were like, whoa, we did not bring enough games for this. Just because it moved so fast without a lot of demos and playthroughs.
I mean, it strikes me so funny that that's how you saw it. Because the way I saw it was like, a dozen people selling T-shirts, and to be frank, I'm only going to buy shirts from Inch by Inch or Chomp. Like, I'm not even going to look at the other booths, right? Like, these are two people I've been buying for forever, and I just don't have time, right? But you guys stood out, right? Like, you and JP Boneyard sold there before too with National Poster Respect, because like as being like a giant poster wall, and then a game. Like, you were the only one selling a game. And at night, like, everyone's just going back to the hotel room and like hanging out in the Marriott. So like, you guys gave someone something to do. So to me, I was like, these guys are geniuses.
That's awesome. That was totally by accident that it worked out like that, and we were the only product of that type. But it was, I think, to your point too, that audience is they're much more willing to jump in quicker to that, because of the looks of it.
Sure.
Sorry, Will, your video is frozen right now, and I just want to make sure that I'm not also.
You pixelate now and then, but you're pretty good. Can you hear me?
Okay, great. I can hear you great. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just gonna keep on going.
Yeah, we'll see how it
Sweet.
goes.
So conference-wise, other than Creative South, we did like a small Tennessee Game Days, which is up in Nashville. And then we've exhibited like Southern Fried Gaming Expo in Atlanta, which is like a sweet arcade/pinball thing. Those were all smaller conferences compared to Gen Con or whatnot, which there was like lead up to that. But those were helpful in that we needed to see like, oh, you have to demo well to sell your product at a much more gaming convention, right? Like we need to, because we're not the only game there,
right?
We need to convince you that our game is worth buying or worth your money, and it's going to yield some really fun times in your life, right? So the demo, no one had heard of us at that point, or a lot of people hadn't known about us, and so it required a lot of demoing. We got lucky. So the first year of Gen Con, that you exhibit, you can go into Entrepreneurs Avenue, where you get like a discount on the amount to pay to the conference to exhibit there. And then we also got featured as like one of the up and comers, or I can't remember what they called that. Entrepreneurs like Avenue Award, but they put you on an end cap, which you'll get a 10 by 20 spot instead of a 10 by 10 spot. And that was huge because you have like more room to exhibit, but we don't have that much product, but great, this is awesome. And we were across from the bathrooms, and so that was huge to be able to not break the bank, to go to a conference and see something like that, because that's the scary moment. It's like you doing these smaller conferences can help build like how much inventory we should bring based on the amount of people at a conference, and how many demos are we doing that are yielding X amount of sales or whatnot, right? It's almost like math at some point, which sounds so boring, but also gamery at times.
And I think this is like, that's what people are interested in. So for a conference like Creative South, a graphic design conference, you literally are going there for one reason, I would assume, which is one-to-one sale, B2C sales. Like, you're just trying to move one unit at a time. Is that the same goal and same reason that would drive you to go to something like Gen Con? where the competition is higher. And I would assume, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume like the buy-in amount for a booth at Gen Con is higher than something like Creative South. Is that fair to assume?
Oh yeah, Gen Con is like sometimes like, I mean, full candid honesty here. Like last year, I think we just broke even on the
Right.
amount of expenses and the sales that we had there. It was just like that was like almost a wash, but it's marketing in a sense, right?
Right.
So it can be. Gen Con is a much more expensive conference to exhibit at based on the other conferences that we have done in the past. But we've also learned a lot each year of how to do Gen Con better each year is kind of our goal. And we just had a meeting today of debriefing from all the feedback from the team of like what were wins at Gen Con, what were misses, what did we learn from the years past that we didn't even know that we had learned this year, you know? And so it was like Caper, which is a game that I have such a heart for in our catalog, didn't sell well at Gen Con at all. And there was the expectation that this thing is just going to sell, right? Like this game is a 8.0 on BGG. It has a 10 out of 10 from Z at the Dice Tower. And the art is Josh again, just knocks it out of the park. Like, but it's also a 2-player game. And that I think plays into it a bit, but also we didn't feature it well in the booth. And so that was like a learning moment of like what you put in front of people, they will be interested or ask about, right? And so we were kind of the parks booth where we had a sweet outpost. There's cool 59 Parks art there. There's great demo tables of park stuff, and we had a demo table of Caper, but it wasn't featured as well, I think, as we should have featured it to if there was an initiative to get that out there more. I'm getting a little lost here on what your question
No,
was,
no,
but
no.
just saying like,
So, I mean, that was all great. And I think to me, it makes total sense. Me and my brother are working on 2 games, but it's not like you can keep pushing 2 games the whole time. So the fact that you guys like, we have parks, we have expansions for parks. I believe Trails is a standalone game in like the park series. So you have
correct, yep.
multiple titles that you can push. So it makes total sense that you'd be like, our booth is just gonna be Parks booth this year.
Yeah.
It seems
We
like
had Wildlife, the expansion was coming out, which is why we pushed that. But to your point, yeah. So like you start at a 10 by 10 at Gen Con or some of these smaller conferences, you might get like a bigger area or whatnot. But that space is very important from a what are we putting in front of someone? If we equally say we have 10 games and each game is getting the same amount of equalness in the promo, like it's not really promoting a game up front to be like, we think you should care about this, or we're celebrating this release or whatnot. And so we in the beginnings of Gen Con and these other conferences, we only had 1 or 2 games, which was helpful. And that was where that data was coming from. But as we've grown to now have, I don't know, 10 different SKUs or more, there's now like, okay, we need to figure out how to like present these well to people, allow them to engage too. Cause in the past, some of the things about demoing, and it depends on the type of the game that you have, but it's saying like, hey, if this person comes in and learns how to play a turn of Parks within 5 to 10 minutes, we're able to teach them what the game is like, have them play a little bit of a round. And by that time, that person probably knows whether the game is right for them or not. And a lot of times, like, I don't have the statistic. I wish that we would keep that, but it would be like X out of times results in a sale, which is great to know. But at the same time, that if you play a full season or full game of Parks, that's going to take an hour, and it still might result in a sale, but you're just moving people through that demo line a lot slower, and people are getting frustrated. And so knowing like, hey, our booth is set up to show off the game, but we might be able to do demos in different areas, or have like a table where you're reserving a time for a full-on playthrough if people want that, or doing plays together or whatnot. And so even thinking through that level of like, what's the right pitch? And in the past, people in the booth like, hey, come check out this game, and create an inviting atmosphere where they're willing to check it out, and then have these like quick like 5 to 10 minute demo spaces that really help move the people through.
No, that makes total sense. Like, yeah, one of the games we're working on is over an hour play, and you just couldn't expect someone to like take an hour of their day at a conference and just like sit there. But also like you don't have an infinite amount of members to help people go through a game. So when you talk about like a single turn, are you guys kind of seeding decks of cards and seeding bits to control what that turn looks like? Like a video game does that, right? Like a video game doesn't give you a random place to play. Like, here's the experience we want you to have to go through. So like, are you guys shuffling the deck like one way so that they're for sure to get the right cards?
Exactly. You got it. So it's like, building upon what people already know and then introducing that stuff as it comes out to help them learn the game. But yeah, we definitely set it up to be like, what's the easiest first play and whatnot. And there maybe is something there for rule books or other things that would help people dive into a game in the easiest state. But yes, that's a great call out of just going like, we are definitely setting things up that way.
So the one question I was asking before, I probably wasn't very clear. So Creative South is 100% just B2C. Are you trying to like get distribution at things like Gen Con, or is it still just like, are you still just there trying to sell to one person at a time?
Great question. So Gen Con is mostly B2C, like direct interfacing. We treat that as a customer conference where it's like, what are we doing to celebrate our games and celebrate the community that is there? And how are we creating events or other things around that where people feel like they can get to know or get, hey, I want to celebrate parks with other people. Let's go to this thing and play games together and do that, right? There are moments when it's like B2B, if we want to treat it that way in a sense, of designers will pitch us a lot of games at Gen Con, right? So it's like, hey, I did not work the booth at all. I would jump in there and help out as needed, but this was the first year where I was booked up on meetings from just like basically 9 to 5, just taking pitches and seeing, hey, what would make sense as a Keymaster game and whatnot, and trying to find. Sometimes we'll dev things internally. Sometimes we work with people outside of that and whatnot. And then we also had pitches with our PSI as our consolidator. They're like a middleman in between hobby distribution and Target and Walmart and Barnes and Noble. They handle all of those clients or that setup. Whereas we handle all of Amazon, all of our Shopify store, all of our own conventions and whatnot. But at these conventions, everybody's there. And so they will schedule time with Keymaster, go like, hey, the Barnes & Noble buyer will be coming by your booth at this time, and they want to demo what's coming out for the future of Keymaster. And so we'll take time to set up pitch sheets, one pagers that talk about the game, and then play maybe a turn or so with them to show, hey, was this something that Barnes & Noble would be interested in? And it's kind of that first, like, dip your foot in the water, and then there's more conversations that happen after that. But that happens. That's a big moment at Gen Con for us because a lot of the buyers at these places are planning next year, right? 2023's fall or summer catalog and all that good stuff now. So they're all wanting to see those sort of things now, so there can be good prep time for it in the future.
Yeah, so Gen Con's like vastly more complicated. You're doing the direct to sales to your customers. You're doing weird kind of marketing yourself, like pitches all the day. You're trying to pitch to your middle person and distribution and trying to get into like those big box stores. Mm-hmm. I would assume there's also a certain amount of media that occurs at a place like Gen Con. Like are so blogs and stuff coming to talk to you?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's a great moment. Like Jen, who's our community manager, has a great relationships with a bunch of different people. And so we have like a code name project that I can't talk about. Probably they would get really mad at me if I did. But we were trying to set up at least those initial media meetings around that to start sharing some details and leaking out like, hey, we're really excited about this. This is the type of game. This is these special things that'll make it hopefully extra crazy and whatnot. But that we set up some media time like that, which is great. And then oftentimes media will reach out to us just to be like, hey, we see you have a new game like Wildlife. Can we come over there and do like interview the designer, the developer, or the artist and things like that, and just to provide content for them in that way. Too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It just feels like nonstop. There's something exciting going on. And then at night, we usually try to get some time with the team over at dinner, decompress from the day because you're just worn out, but also maybe play a game. We usually don't get to play any of our games or any of other games. We usually play a lot of our own games, but we try to play at least one big game.
And I'm sure just like individually, like there's the overarching story of Gen Con, but each one of you needs to debrief because like you guys saw things that other people need to hear.
Yes.
So we talked about how to do those demos for customers.
Yep.
And I'm not don't talk about the secret project, but when you talk to a distributor, like let's say you had a meeting with Barnes & Noble, are you bringing a prototype then too that you're like keeping hush hush but showing them for next year?
Correct. Yep. And so right now we have a few projects. Panda is our manufacturer. They're awesome. Their component level is top notch, and we'll work with them to make pre-production copies of the game. Those are like in the process. You can make a few of those in the beginning that cost X amount per pre-production copy, depending on how big your game is. But they're really nice. Like man, I really want to pick up some pieces right now and show them to you, but I can't
That's
because
okay.
they're part of that project.
Yeah.
But just saying like that helps. They're also willing to have if you need to 3D print stuff or do other things or print cards and just sleeve them, they're also willing. It doesn't have to be like a perfect setup by any means, but by December, basically, we need to get them a very clear, like mass produced version of the game after that. But yes, the goal is to have a very clear product pitch to that place.
Yeah.
To
and I'm assuming a scripted conversation, like you're not going to go in there and not know what's happening. Like it's almost like a play, right? Like you're acting out your roles. Panda's a name that comes up in every conversation I've ever had with anybody in games. Usually being like, you should see how much it's going to cost to make your game with Panda. Like, you should just use them. So it's cool to hear that you also are using them, even at your scale, that they're still being a partner is valuable to you.
Yeah, they've been amazing. I think they've like solved certain issues or walk with us through pre-production, which is a lot of like color sampling and figuring out what, like the stain in Parks's wood was creating issues at one point, and they bought like a whole machine to solve that process. I don't understand. I want to go to the factory one day and check it all out. Sure. But yes, like all of that, they have been so on board. And I think there's a commitment, right? In any partnership, you need both parties need to be invested in one another's success or whatnot. And so it's like, yes, we love what they're doing for us. And then they're coming back and saying, yeah, like we're trying to help solve a lot of the things they all have that we're excited about too. And so they've been great.
So for like hobbyists or people who are just starting, you would recommend, it sounds like, picking small conferences, maybe not even game conferences, but just conferences where you find your fit, and all you need is something to sell. Like that's all you need. But if you're going to go to a Gencon or like one of those leading conventions, you need to have a roadmap, what you're doing in a year, what you have now. You have to be able to fill a booth, which means you need the money to like make a booth. So don't rush to a Gencon. Try to find your more local, smaller events first.
Yeah, and that's same way with playtesting is kind of a great way to think about it as you just talked about it. But yeah, to your point of finding even an adjacent market for us, we didn't realize we were doing that. But Creative South, in a sense, was an adjacent market of designers who love games, and we are designers who love games, and we're just like, we're going there because of that, because we love designers. But with him, like for Campy, we went to like MonsterCon was another one that was like in Atlanta that was like, oh, here's this other, and just seeing how people are reacting to that. If you have a game that's like targeted at board gamers, then by all means go to a board gaming conference so you're getting the best like understanding of how are hobby gamers responding to this game. But for Campy, it was like the initiative there was like, there should be a game where people maybe don't normally game could jump in and play, and getting some like on the ground insight there. And then yes, for Gen Con, I don't want to I think we still hand built the booth. Kyle cut up the wood. I helped him design it, and he then went to his like backyard shed, cut up all the stuff. We painted it and did it that way. So like it's still okay to do makeshift stuff as long as it friggin' looks awesome and slaps. Hopefully that was our goal or whatnot. But just that Gen Con it can be a scary moment for sure, and being like, am I ready for this? And I think that even knowing like, hey, it doesn't make sense for us to demo games here, and going like, this is our focus and what are the clear wins we want to get out of this conference. We want to get marketing out there so people come and check us out, and we might be doing a few playthroughs throughout the conference, but we're not trying to do all these demos or whatnot. But it's just having like each conference you could just set up, and we do that. Even PAX is different for us of like, what are the goals and outcomes of that versus what are the goals and outcomes of Gen Con.
Could you talk about that a little bit? So PAX, are we talking normal PAX or PAX Unplugged?
PAX Unplugged, sorry.
Cool.
Yeah.
So if anyone's not familiar, is it still in Philly, right?
It's in Philly, yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Philly, but if you're into Philly, you can go to Philly.
You can do it.
But I think I went the first year, and it was, you see pictures of normal PAX, and it's just like shoulder to shoulder, super spreader event. And PAX Unplugged seemed way just different. Like it was way chiller. Even the schedule seemed a little bit more relaxed. Like there's time to go just play games. So how do you guys approach different conferences differently? Like how would PAX be different for you?
Great question. So Gen Con demands the whole team's all, and not only that, we'll probably work with outside volunteers, not even volunteers, we pay them to be a part of our booth to help out with demoing and all these things, because a team of 5 can't support the booth size that we have. And we want the people coming in to have a great time and feel awesome. Maybe at PAX though, it's like, hey, we can the amount of volunteers needed or those sort of things is a lot smaller because as you mentioned there, like there's just not as many people going through the halls and whatnot. So it's just like, is our goal to like cause a stir in marketing of an upcoming project that we're really excited about, and we want to put things out there, get some playthroughs in with media, and it's a much more like media focused conference where we're like scheduling a lot of those events versus like direct consumer sales, which Gencon's focuses seem to be for us. You can do all the things at different places, but having a clear priority around that. So for PAX 2, I went last year, or we exhibited there last year, and it's probably unfair too because it was like still in like kind of COVID area, and you're wearing masks and you're trying to talk through the masks to demo games, and it's like, this is destroying my voice by the end of the day. Yeah. But also going like, this can just be a good team building time where we're coming together and hanging out and getting to play games or getting to play prototypes of stuff that we're working on in person. So I mentioned our team earlier. 2 of us are in Athens. 1 is in Nashville. 2 are in New York, or New Jersey. 1 in New Jersey. 1
but you need an excuse to get together.
Yeah, exactly. And just being able to come together is like really important as a team. And I think as we're processing stuff, having that design space where you're doing it in person, you can just, I feel like, solve problems a little quicker. I love TTS. That's been really helpful for us, tabletop simulator, to test on. But I think that nothing just that's the way that people are going to engage the product, is with tactileness and making these decisions that way. And so I'm getting away from the thing, but the main thing I'm trying to say about PAX is like being in person together and being with a team. I think you can't beat it. And so sometimes a conference might just be like, hey, we're having these great moments where we're just aligned and doing stuff. But for us, PAX, I think we're looking at it as, what are some things that we want to share there? Or do we just want to say, hey, here we're exhibiting these things, and it's a good engagement moment for Keymaster or fans of Parks or fans of Caper? And how are we creating spaces for people to enjoy those and get to know more people? Our core value is connection, right? We want to bring people together to celebrate the parks or things that they might share a common interest in, and create further connections in their life through that. And so how are we doing that at conferences is what we're asking, and just being like, hey, let's do a fun event at an arcade nearby and maybe play some games and other things there with people that are fans of Keymaster or whatever. So those are the kind of things we think about.
I think that's really important to know, because like when I think of in-person events, I think of the 3 things we've talked about so far. Like these are the 3 things I experienced, or I think things I watch online. But even for a smaller team, smaller than yours, who might be just working on their first title, like you can do small, little grassroots things, right? Almost like look at it like a local band. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
They're pairing up with other bands. Like, how can we be like strategic of like, how can we get the most people here while also having the most fun? And maybe money isn't always the goal. Local bands, money's never the goal, right? There's the joke where your equipment costs more than the car and more than the gas that it took to get to the venue. Like,
yeah, for sure.
So I think it's, how creative can you be to do things like at an arcade or other areas to just keep getting your game tested, keep getting it in front of people, keep getting reactions. That's really smart.
And aligning with other creators too, who are doing it and being like, hey, we can share cost here. Even if we did like to get people out, we might be like, first drink is on us, or whatever we do, give people tickets that way, but being like, we're willing to split the cost, and it might end up being like $200 per person per party, or not per party that would be there as part of that event. But it's like, cool, this got a lot of people here, and it got a lot of people excited about what's coming to talk about it and be champions for you and your project that's coming along, because people want that, right? They want to be invited into the early part of it, and finding those people who want to be those ambassadors.
I've experienced that. Like, I had a clothing brand, and it was the same thing. Like, people who should not wear my clothing were still down to give me $20 because they just want to be a part of it.
Yeah.
Right. And it was humbling to know, like, these people I had not talked to in a long time were still like, let me give you $20. Like, this is cool. And I think a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to go make stuff themselves. So if they can help someone else make something, it's just like, community grows pretty fast if you allow it to.
Yeah, exactly. That's huge. If you allow it to, it's easy. That's what we've been, I guess, the call out for me there. Like, how are we supporting our community well? And obviously we have the online communities of Facebook and those places, but that convention piece, or even having those moments where it's like, hey, let's do something in person that celebrates these and connects people at a deeper level. Because people are coming up in the conventions too, they're like cosplaying Parks, right? It's like, what in the world?
Awesome.
How was this at this place? Of like, oh my gosh, this person has like a shirt of cards like that they've put on. What in the world? Like,
that's gotta be wild.
Yeah, it was wild. It was like, oh my gosh. And then people will come up and be like, hey, we've taken pictures of like the card, and then they're like, here's the park that we have that we took this picture that matches the art
I
in the
think I
card
saw
because we're
that on your stories today. They had
oh my
the two
gosh,
cards up against the mountains. I was like, that's so dope.
what in the world? Yeah, it's nuts. And that's also more props to JP and the 59 people who did this amazing art too. Like,
Yeah, but no one's walking around with posters in the park, right? Like you're creating a culture where people want to engage the material. And I remember, again, no offense to you guys or no awkwardness meant, but like when I first, like a park game, I was like, that sounds dumb. And then I looked at it, I was like, they figured it out. Like I was wrong. Like that looks
nice.
dope. So there's a part of that where it's got to be shocking to most people, right? It's a casual, just like traveling parks game, and it's cool, and the mechanics seem fun. And it's fun enough that like when they go for a trip, they're like, let me go get the card because this would be really fun. And it's just like, yeah, posters don't do that, but like getting around a table and making memories with friends is what causes that.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, give credit to artists, obviously, but like it's not the artists. it's the table, it's the relationships they're building.
And I think that's what's cool, and we try to embrace that too. And some places go for more IP based things, like right, let's do a Marvel thing, or let's do this fun. And I think you get a lot of buy-in from that IP too, where you can like push it into a new space for people and get them to enjoy it. But I think for us, just seeing that too, the response to the parks of people who had never been to the parks before, and they ended up playing our games because they were gamers, and then they're like, this made me want to go visit the parks, and now this has changed our life. Like our lifestyle is now revolving. It's like, whoa, this is nuts. And it's like, I had such a small vision in the beginning of like, I'm really excited about this thing. I love the parks and I love making games. It's like, can be a cool moment, but just like, there's no telling where people will end up being inspired and taking your ideas, you know, in ways that you never dreamed, which was, I think, the most inspiring part of,
So I guess talking about like these interactions and relationships, how much do you think Gencon changed over COVID? You guys had done Gencon pre-COVID, correct? And you just came back last couple weeks from this year's Gencon. Like, were there big noticeable things, different, like not including masks, right? The obvious stuff, but like, did people approach your game differently? I know, and not to run on this question too long, but I know like video games culturally changed. Like the indie games that came out over COVID were very different than the indie games pre-COVID. So did you see that? Like, did people react differently to your games? Were interactions different, or did things feel like they were going back to normal?
This year felt like a little bit more normal Gen Con. The year before was like a lot less people, a lot more space. You had, like you were talking about with PAX, a lot more shoulder room to walk around and whatnot. And it was just a lot different of what we expected. I think what we, I guess, realized was, hey, we were having to do a lot of like get ourselves out there moments for the first 3 Gen Cons, you know, like, hey, this is Can't Be Creatures. This is this awesome game. You don't, and it's an easy value proposition of like, this is only $20 or whatever it may be, that you're like, cool, like I'm willing to take a risk on that. And the higher price game, like the more that person, like you got to sell them on what's happening there. But those sales were like, we were having to work for them. Whereas now it felt like people were just coming to us being like, we love parks and we want the next thing. And that like Keymaster is more getting on the map, which did some of the work for us in a great way of like, just being like more of a brand that people are starting to know. And so I think that was a big difference. If people would come to the booth with, who weren't just like finding us, right? They were actually like,
looking for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they weren't stumbling upon you, or you weren't pulling them into your booth.
Yeah,
they were like coming and looking for you, and like you said, like dressing up like you guys, which is just again wild,
crazy. But yeah, and so there were new problems to solve of like, wow, there's a line. We've never had this long of a line before, and how are we respecting people's time in the line, and how are we moving it quickly and solving those sort of things that tend to happen. So all that to say that I guess difference wise is this felt much more normal now, but there's just new things for Keymaster to learn each year for sure, because we just feel like every time there's new problems and things. So
of course, boothing anywhere, you have to learn and adapt and pivot on the spot no matter what. Like things happen, which I guess will bring us. I got 3 more questions for you. You think you're good on time?
I love talking in general, so okay. Let's go. I'm just kidding.
So, what do you think, like some of the top lessons you've learned from doing in-person events, thinking about kind of people who are just starting to get into publishing their games that they've been working on?
Yeah, I think nothing beats the reactions of understanding your stuff in person. And so we started with in-person events here in Athens for Control, which was our first Kickstarter game, where that was like, hey, let's partner with the Rook and Pawn or partner with Creature and Comfort, a local brewery and a local game cafe, and do 2 nights where we're like doing play tests and getting on the spot playing from people. And I think conventions feel that way for us too, even though it is still, maybe these products are already out, or maybe the goal is like they're not out and we're looking at, this is a great moment for play testing of this idea that's coming up, and we have some of the art and we're going to feature this, and it's kind of just like a good marketing start or whatever for us. And so that's part of it, of just nothing beats the on the ground, seeing people play your games is just really fun. It's also really disheartening because sometimes it's like, this thing sucks, you know, and you're like, okay, great, thank you. We will make it better. But I think that,
or not,
that
right?
nothing
Or
beats
it's just
feedback.
not for them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, too. That for sure.
We've been playtesting this our game. Like I told you, I have like a big box background, so we're testing this game. It's an hour 15. It's complicated, and there are people who have tested it for us and just be like, I don't get it. And like the person next to them, like when we ask our final feedback, they'll be like, I didn't know I was doing half the time, and I don't feel like I was contributing. And the person next to me will be like, make it harder, right?
Yeah.
And like trying to figure out like, where's that audience? So like, I think even
target
like
audience, that's a good call. Like, who are you trying to reach with your game? And Ed in Pixar, Ed Catmull talks about this, where it's like, hey, at some point it's your idea because you're inspired from it, and it starts off that way. And this is like, hey, we're making this thing because I really want to make it, and I can't not make this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some points it needs to transition to like, hey, how are we making this for the world? Because if you're the only one who thinks this joke is really funny, it probably shouldn't be in the movie. Like, versus like, hey, who are we making this for? And then listening to that feedback, but also never compromising your core vision for that product too, I think is like that fine needle that you have to thread as you're talking about it here.
Yeah. One of the things you said kind of started a new question in my head. So for people, we're talking like they're working on their games, they might be getting ready to go booth. There's also another decision they need to make, which is like, do I publish it or do I pitch it to a publisher?
Yeah.
How did you guys decide, like after Control, and you got a successful Kickstarter, things were going well, but how did you decide like this wasn't just a game first, but it's going to be a company, and we want to handle all the publishing, and we didn't just want to like sell our idea to someone else?
Great question. So the way Keymaster started was Kyle was going into his 3rd open heart surgery. Crazy moment for him, and he's getting into modern board games, going like, what, there's all these cool games. He's watching tabletop with all that stuff. I feel like it was so hot, and I miss it now. But he's getting into games back in 2014 or 15 or whatnot. And who's gonna say no to a guy going to play board games going into open heart surgery? It's like, of course I'll go play games with you. You know, you're gonna have open heart surgery. And so from that time, he was like, came out of it, healed up. It takes like 3 months to heal up from an open heart surgery. But in that process, yeah, you know, it does sound fast though, too, for sure. But just that it's like, hey, this is something that I want to do. I love illustration, is where Kyle was at. I want to start a business around making games. I love what it did for me. And I met him around that time also, and was like, whoa, I love games too. I've been playing them in Seattle, is where I was before Athens. And like, you're making games. Let's make games. This is awesome. And so Kyle at first was like, oh, do I want to pitch these to people? And he had sent it to, a couple of his ideas to publishers, but in the end, we're like, hey, if we're doing this together, let's freaking like see what we can do. Because I feel like we can learn those parts. And there is a whole business side, right? And if it's like, if I just really want to make games, like design games, and I nerd out on the mechanics and just making really great designs, like I don't have to do all the business side, right? Like I shouldn't do all the business side if that side isn't enticing to me, or I'm not. If I want to learn it, great. Like I can get skilled there. But if I don't want to learn it, I don't think that's going to yield a good, you're not going to serve people well in your business, because that's a core part of delivering games to people well, is like, how do you make this at the right cost, get it at the right price for people, ship them in a way that gets them the game in a timely manner, respects that community well, and takes care of them. And so I think that like for a game designer, I think of, and sometimes I feel that way, and I'll compare ourselves to like, man, Eric Lane, he is the man. He's like coming up with designs nonstop. And it just feels like, I mean, but he's living in that world as a game designer. And I think as a game publisher, you're also thinking of, hey, what is the product? How do we reach people well with this product? And what to your point, like the markets or the target audiences. And we're coming along designers that have a core idea, going like, okay, we see this can hit in this way. The worst horror stories are people will take a designer's idea and slap the worst theme possible where that designer wasn't aligning or whatnot. But in the best cases, it's like a publisher and designer have a vested interest of getting this game out there as much as possible and doing it to the nines, right? And so it's like, how do we partner with designers in that way? And if we are making a change to something, we're walking through the process together and figuring that out. But if you want to learn the business side and be like, hey, these are systems, I can figure out these systems. This sounds fun, running a Kickstarter, knowing how to market your game, knowing how to create a product that then presents itself in a way that it does the work of selling it to that person, then by all means, go for it. Like, I don't think we thought about any of that. It was just like, hey, it seems like you can just make a game, and Kickstarter was a different place back then, put it on Kickstarter, and we've like thrown ourselves in that mix and been like, okay, there are certain things that I love here and certain things that I don't want to do at all, which is where, as the business has grown out, it's been helpful to have other people take on roles that they're much stronger in, and it doesn't serve people well when I'm doing something else that is not my core strength or whatnot.
No, I mean, yeah, there's so many good insights to what you said there. A big one, it was just like you guys were all in. Like there didn't seem like there was another option, right? Like if pitching it around is an option, then it should be the only option. And like you guys just realized it was not an option.
Right.
And a lot of this is coming, it's something I've been thinking about. Like I've got a game, right? And it's playtesting well and it's growing. And it's just like, all right, what do I do now? Like, do I do this game publishing thing? Do I try to like merchandise and all that stuff? Do I try to get in production? And I saw a Reddit post and it was just like the biggest evil Kickstarter has done is make everyone think they're a publisher. And there's just a big chunk of people who are not publishers who aren't able to do what Keymaster did. And just to reiterate from the beginning, like I've never played a Keymaster game and you're still one of my favorite studios or game publishers, which means that all that other stuff matters like tremendously, right? Like I am now like trumping your success everywhere I go. I'm just like, you guys should go check out Keymaster. They're like, have you played the guys? Like, no, but they're dope. Like, make sure like your family would love them. You should buy those games. And none of that was game design. Like, I'm sure like some of the videos I've watched have encouraged me, but like all of it was like how you guys are marketing. How do you run yourselves? My interactions with the people behind your table might have been you even back then at Creative South. Like all those things mattered way more than all the games I've played physically. Like, so yeah, there's just like all those layers that you need to be aware of because the weakest chain will like break, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Super interesting. I'm
same thing with like Jamie for us, right? Like coming in, and that's what I'm so stoked that y'all are doing this and wanting to get more good content out there that helps other creators figure out where am I best? Am I best in this publisher area? Am I best as a game designer? How do I learn the things that I want to learn and then apply them to my life so that like the board game industry just gets to flourish? It's just so cool. For us, Jamie, that was that, right? Jamie Stonemeyer Games or whatnot. Like how much Kickstarter stuff he was sharing was just like, holy smokes, man, this is crazy. This is so helpful to come in here. And I just love you and your brand, even though I hadn't played a Stonemeyer game at that point. But already it was like, you came across in this way that was just so helpful for the industry and good. And I think that that's a huge part of, if board games are about bringing people together, like we should celebrate that and do that well and whatnot. And I think there's still a lot that Keymaster has to learn in that, but I think that's cool. I'm stoked that that feels that way for you by all means. I think that, yeah. Okay.
As we start wrapping up, I just want to try to have maybe a little bit of celebration. Like what is like the best story that stands out of your mind from this last Gen Con? Like if you think back 2 weeks ago, like was there one moment where you're just like, this made it all worth it?
I think it continues to feel all worth it by any means of when someone has a good time with our game, like that game did the thing. So it's like that it's a whole lot of work, but that moment where you see like someone is reacting to this in a way that is giving joy into their life. Yes, the crazy success stories of this person wasn't doing any walking in their life in general. And then they moved to like, hey, I want to start hiking around the parks. Like that's a story that's come out in the past year. That's like, this is amazing. And that has changed that person's life is an amazing story. And I celebrate like, that is obviously like, holy smokes, this is like way beyond me and anything. But I think that also just that I'm a 7/8 on the Enneagram. 8-wing 7 is how I should put that actually. But just that like the entertainer in me is just like, yes, y'all had such a good time together. I provided you joy, or just a way to connect over a place where you're looking each other in the eye and having conversations around maybe the parks or maybe something else that you're talking about in the game or whatever it may be. But like those moments always feel like, and that's why we, looking back on our conversation here, like those in moment times at Gen Con where that's happening for people are so meaningful for me. And it just feels like continually is like putting gas in the tank and being like, all right, I'm also like so bad about moving on to the next exciting thing. Cause it's like, cool, I got this creative idea out the door. It's doing the thing. Great. But now like, let me tell you about this next thing. It's going to be, and so I think those are also good reminder moments of like, how are we taking care of the stuff that's out there already and taking care of the people, or just celebrating the people in that.
Yeah. I mean, what I'm hearing is that Gen Con, these events have a non-financial benefit that makes almost all worth it, because games are about the people, and these are your chances to go and be with the people who love your game.
Yeah. Yep.
Final question. I know I only asked for 3. Here's like a little bonus 4. You guys on Instagram today posted about game night snacks. What are your favorite game night snacks?
Game night snacks, man. Mine secretly was that Hiker's Tonic there. I put that together on there, which was like, it's easy to remember, 1, 2, 3, 1 ounce of elderflower liqueur, 2 ounces of gin, 3 ounces of tonic, stir it all up. You got a nice drink. I like to partake in a drink at game night, and different people will bring stuff, which is always fun to be like, oh, you brought this really weird, odd beer that tastes super funky, but great, dude, this is fun. I think it's just a moment to share life together is what I love about that. But my favorite snacks, besides a delicious drink like that, are chocolate almonds from Trader Joe's. Salted chocolate almonds is always a great one. And even in those snacks, I was like, one of the guys submitted a recipe. I was like, yo, dude, this is, you put puppy chow in here? Like, this is messy. Like, puppy chow is not
Muddy Buddies or
white
like
trash is what we knew it as.
It's like Chex and sugar.
Chex and sugar. Yep. And so it's like, this is awful. Are people sleeving their cards at your events? How are you eating this?
I'm currently in Lincoln, Nebraska, but all my gaming friends were in Jersey, and every game had pizza, because pizza is a love language there. But same thing, like we got the greasiest food we could.
It was like, there's this greasy card now.
But everyone had like a wad of paper towel. Like it was understood. Like there's a separation.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But yeah, Muddy Buddies. I mean, there's not enough paper towels in the world.
Yeah. I'll kick off. Sometimes I recently got it. Sorry, long story. I got a Neapolitan style pizza grill over pandemic. That was another little hobby to jump into. And I love cooking pizza before game night and doing like a fun, I'll make the dough the day before, but we won't eat the pizza because it's so messy. I still haven't figured out.
Yeah, but you're home. Like it's different than like the thin crust Jersey.
I've
been relentlessly complaining online about just, there's no bagels and there's no pizza here. Like just, it's like driving me nuts. Yeah. And people are like, just make your own pizza. I was like, that's not what I want. Like you don't understand.
Yeah. Doesn't work like that. That was we went to Jersey over the summer, and our friend there was like, this is the best pizza you'll ever have, just so you know.
It's so hard though. Like when I bring people to like my like little, and this is totally off topic, but like my little mom and pop shops that I love, they're like, this isn't that great. Like, I thought we were going to go to some like gourmet pizza place. I was like, no, like this is the pizza you want. This is it.
Yes.
Oh, Mattox, thank you so much. I feel rejuvenated, and like I've got so many things to think about and think through.
I feel like there's like 10 more things 10 more podcasts in general, each one that we could talk about different stuff. This is
not the biggest Rogan fan, but like this was 1 hour and I've got at least another 3 or 4 in me.
That's right.
So if you're up for it, I would love to have you back in the future. Maybe when you have your next release, we can bring you back so we can actually talk about game design a little bit, not just people, because I'm sure you have a ton of value there as well.
Yeah.
So where should people find you? And if someone could buy your game anywhere, where's the #1 spot you want them to go buy your game?
Great question. People can find me. We're trying to do a better job at Keymaster of just being like, here's Keymaster. At Mattox Schuler is my Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. And then, just order on Keymaster. Mattox at keymastergames.com is my email if you want to reach out and talk about anything. I love talking about games. And then if you want to buy one of our games, buy them at the place that you most love to shop, I would say, whatever's easiest. But if you go through our site, we're trying to tailor that experience more towards, taking care of you as well.
So if you want that one-on-one and not just faceless Walmart, go straight to the Shopify, your website.
Yeah, our website is great for that.
Cool. And when this is on YouTube, where most of you are probably listening to this right now, all this is in the description because I'll make sure to add it. So, Mattox, thank you again so much. I think that's going to be it for us tonight. Bye.
See ya. Thank y'all.